Scientists couldn't stop wondering how this baby was born. There are numerous secrets and failed experiments in the field of research and among scientists. Moreover, the least that can be said of them in their description is that they are inhumane, particularly towards animals. Even humans, including children, were not exempt from these trials. The majority of these trials are thought to be more deadly than the Second World War. At the very least, the conflict may come to an end someday, but the consequences of these experiments may last a lifetime. The enormous child's biological experiment is about to begin. The cops in the United States discovered a massive youngster in a hidden laboratory that had been abandoned 10 years before, and following further examination, it was discovered that the youngster had been subjected to biological experiments, with the results of the experiments remaining a closely guarded secret. As a result, they attempted to conceal it. The child is believed to be one of the victims of research, and it was only through his discovery that we learned just how harsh these scientists can be. One of the witnesses, who asked not to be identified for security concerns, described the third and most disturbing aspect of the experiments. Their testimony stated that they employed cameras to shoot the child's discovery from every angle and to capture every detail of his or her appearance. Witnesses to these tests make agreements with one another that forbid them from discussing what is taking place in the laboratory. The purpose of the experiment is to make a gigantic child, but the exact method by which this is accomplished is unknown because the scientists keep everything relating to the experiments hidden. Even the authorities was reluctant to bring this crime to the attention of the public due to the potential for widespread hysteria. Despite the fact that 10 years have gone, the child appears to be alive and well. And despite the fact that he passed away many years ago, chemicals continue to expand his size. The investigation into this crime was carried out by a secret squad. Who knows just how many youngsters may be subjected to such tests in the future? I sincerely hope that no one would ever survive to witness such development. In another heartbreaking story, police investigate grisly find in remote Russian town. In Tobolsk, western Siberia, police have launched an investigation into a macabre discovery of body parts, including bones and human organs, that had been abandoned and at a rundown facility. Scars left over from surgical procedures can be seen on the bodies of many newborn babies. In a park frequented by youngsters, a medical student came across a terrible discovery. On the shelves, I noticed jars containing human remains, blood test slides, and skulls. Locals were stunned when mummified bones of babies were discovered in an abandoned pathology lab in Russia. The investigation is underway by the Russian police. Authorities in Tobolsk, western Siberia, have initiated an investigation into the gruesome finding of body parts, including bones and human organs, scattered over the facility's dilapidated grounds. According to the Siberian Times, scars could be seen on the bodies of many of the babies, indicating that medical procedures had been performed on them as recently as 3 years ago. Georgy Grigorchuk, a medical student from Tobolsk, made the frightening and gruesome discovery while going through a park frequented by youngsters. He noticed a building with an open door and decided to investigate more. When he arrived at the facility, he was greeted by jars containing human remains, blood test slides that had been used, and skulls that had been left on dusty shelves. The sides of the plastic jars were labeled with dates, including January 2012. In his words, I learned about this institution through other students at my medical college. I'd heard that this laboratory had a lot of interesting things that had been abandoned. Specifically, there were some books sitting about, organs in glass jars, and a slew of documents. For a medical student, it was a fascinating experience. What appears to be the remains of a little child have been discovered in a jar in an abandoned building. Scars could be seen on the bodies of similar babies that had been discovered, indicating that surgical procedures had been performed on them. Although the dilapidated structure was in a condition of ruin, some of the plastic jars had dates written on the side that were as recent as 2012. The investigation into the horror has begun at a request of the Tobolsk State Prosecutor's Office, which is investigating possible violations of the law on the disposal of human remains and medical records by the former laboratory. Mr. Grigorchek notified local press about the discovery of human remains in the old laboratory, which also houses a morgue, after receiving a tip from a witness. He informed the local news agency Tobolsk.info of his discovery, and the resultant report, which highlighted the withered corpses of babies, sparked a scandal, sparking shock and outrage among the local community. There were documentation beside the human remains that detailed the medical histories of the deceased patients and the nature of the treatments that were performed, as well as the names of the deceased patients' families and other personal information. The facility had previously been utilized for post-mortem examinations until the work was relocated to a new facility at a nearby medical center. According to Grigorchuk, when the newspaper reports were published, the facility's door was hammered shut, but the human remains were still inside despite the closure. Tobolsk State Prosecutor's Office launched an investigation into the atrocity after receiving information that the previous laboratory had violated the law on the disposal of human remains and medical documentation. It is not known if or not the authorities that have been contacted the parents of any of the deceased children who were recognized in the medical data. Little Albert conducts an experiment. In 1921, one of the most heinous experiments in the history of the world was carried out. In this paper, the authors hoped to demonstrate how the recently found classical conditioning theory can be used to regulate the fear of white mice in little Albert, an 11-month-old boy. In order to quell little Albert's terror, Watson and Rayner used an iron rod to bang on it whenever they saw the white mouse arrive. At first, they introduced the white mouse to the youngster and were surprised to see that he was not scared of it. Later, the two of them carried the white mouse over to the boy while simultaneously banging on an iron rod. Little Albert's first reaction was to sob hysterically. A number of times, the second stage has been completed successfully. At long last, Watson and Rayner presented the white mouse to the youngster without hammering on the iron rod, and the boy was shocked by their actions. This study demonstrated how emotions can be conditioned or controlled in response to certain stimuli. Falsehoods and contradictions began to emerge in the discussion of Albert's account as a result of this experiment, which was conducted in the laboratory. Some of these were even the result of Watson's own actions. Furthermore, Watson and Rayner's experiment was attacked on moral grounds since they did not completely eliminate the effect of training little Albert, who subsequently developed a fear of white mice. Children that stutter have a difficult time. Wendell Johnson conducted experiments on 20 orphan children in Davenport, Iowa in 1939 to determine the causes of stuttering while speaking. In this experiment, Johnson picked one of his students, Mary Tudor, to conduct the experiment while he acted as an observer. Following the division of the children into two groups, the experimental group and the control group, Tudor addressed the accusative youngsters in a positive manner, complimenting them on their fluency in English. As a result of her unfavorable comments about them, she assumed they were stuttering when they made the least of faults during their speech and informed them that they were the cause of it. An abundance of abandoned youngsters, whether those whose speech was normal and those who heard unpleasant speech in the tests, suffered from unfavorable emotional consequences. Some of them have struggled with speech issues for the majority of their lives.